Hi, my name is Russell Molenberg, and this is Eat This Word, a weekly program where I serve up bite-sized bits of Bible. The Bible verses we're looking at today are Daniel chapter 4, verses 34 and 35. I introduced these verses last week, sort of these surprise words that come from King Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man on earth at the time, an enemy of God's people, and yet he's forced has really no other alternative but to acknowledge that God is God, that God is powerful. So here's what he says. He says about our God, his dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" So these words, these verses are about power, about strength, about God's rule and reign. The word that I'll use is sovereignty. To be sovereign, it means to possess supreme power or ultimate strength. A country that is sovereign over an island, that means it's their law, their rules that govern that island or that piece of land. To be king means you are the sovereign over whatever kingdom you have. You're the unquestioned ruler and leader. To be sovereign is to possess supreme or ultimate power. And these verses in Daniel talk about how God is the ultimate sovereign, how he is the one who possesses the final power and complete power over the earth that he created. It's really, and as we're going to see, these verses are really about his power being greater than our power, his sovereignty being greater than our sovereignty. And so let's run through the verses here. It says his dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. So God's power is not limited with respect to time. A king's reign is limited to the span of his lifetime, or shorter if there's a coup or he's overthrown. Here in America, a presidential reign is limited by the election cycle, but God's dominion is not limited by election cycles, not limited by a human lifespan. His dominion goes on from generation to generation, forever and ever. So God is not limited with respect to time. He's not limited, secondly, with respect to geography, people, or place. It's not just that he's sovereign over his people, his chosen people. He's sovereign over all the peoples of the earth. All the peoples of the earth to him are regarded as nothing or as small or of no consequence compared to his strength. Third, he does as he pleases with the powers of heaven, the peoples of the earth. There's no limit to God with regards to power or you might say opposition. Those who resist his will are hopeless against it. No one can, the final question there, no one can hold back his hand. No one can question God. And so God, here's Nebuchadnezzar, who thinks himself a great king, who was in control of great patches of land, vast areas on the map, and yet even he needs to acknowledge that his power does not hold a candle to the power of God. And so I'll say it like this. God's sovereignty is greater than our sovereignty. I think the lesson for us to learn here is that God is sovereign in the world in a way that we, quite frankly, are not even sovereign in our own lives. That in our lives, there's so much that goes beyond our ability to control, that is outside of our strength, things that happen to us, that weaknesses that we experience. An author named Paul David Tripp, I found this quote talking about this verse. He says, it can be a bit scary to consider. You and I have very little power and control over the most significant things in our lives. You and I don't know what's going to happen next. We don't have a clue what will be on our plates next week or next month. We have little control over the principal people in our lives, little power over the situations in which we live, almost no control over the locations of our lives. He illustrates this by talking about a time when he lost his car keys, just as a reminder to him of how little control he has over the details of his life. And that's a small thing, but think about it, getting that phone call in the middle of the night that a dearly beloved member of your family's been in a car accident or something of that sort. Reminders of how little control we have. And then Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4 reminds us that God's sovereignty knows no bounds, that God is not limited with respect to time or people or places or power. And so Paul David Tripp says this notion and this realization can take you in one of two ways. It can either fill you with great anxiety or it can fill you with great relief. And anxiety, that comes when we are God-forgetting. Anxiety comes when we feel like we have to have control, when we want to pull in all the details of our lives, when we feel like our purpose on life is to make sure things go the way that we think in our heads that they should go. And so when we're constantly trying to control all of the events of our lives, when we're seeking to be sovereign in our little spheres, whether that's with our families or in our place of work or even sometimes just in the things that happen to us, it can fill our hearts with a great deal of anxiety, fill our life with a constant source of dread, because you just never know when the next thing is going to go wrong. And so recognizing our lack of sovereignty can fill us with anxiety, or it can fill us with relief. And that's when we're God remembering. There can be great relief in recognizing that yes, things happen to me that are beyond my control, but they're never beyond the control of God. Things happen to me that I can't anticipate or did not see coming, or even as a result of my own frailties and mistakes and sinful nature, and yet it's never outside of the control of God. And in God's sovereignty, in God's powerful supervision of my life, the one who is wise and good and loving and cares about me, in His supervision of my life, I can find that relief, that rest, that release of anxiety, and recognizing that whatever happens, it's never outside of the control of the one about whom Nebuchadnezzar said, if we go back to those verses at the end, that His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. He does as He pleases. And no one can hold back His hand, or no one can say to Him, "What have you done?" So I urge you and encourage you to find relief today in the idea that God is sovereign over your life.